From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with Kim Strassel and Kyle Peterson, and we're talking about Donald Trump and the legal week that he is having and the politics and legal issues surrounding this, one of which was raised, Kim, by Mark Elias, the Democratic lawyer who litigates mostly ballot election law issues, but he floated the possibility that Donald Trump, if he's convicted of some records offense, could be disqualified from ever running again. And this, of course, led to several people at MSNBC near fainting with joy. But is it accurate? And our friends David Rifkin and Lee Casey wrote about this in the Journal today.
Yeah, and just to reprise that article, so their answer is absolutely not. He cannot be barred. And just to run through the legal thinking there, we do have something called the Presidential Records Act of 1978. It came in the wake of Nixon. It does require all kinds of things that the president has to do in terms of turning over documents, et cetera. But even if you don't comply with that law, there are no penalties, civil or criminal, for violating it. There are other statutes that get to the mishandling of public records, in particular one that says that if you violate that statute, that you forfeit your office and you can be disqualified from holding any office. What Rifkin and Casey argue, though, is that that simply wouldn't count in this because the Constitution lays out very clear bars for the few hurdles you need to jump to actually run for the presidency, which are that you have to be a natural-born citizen, you have to be over the age of 35 years, and you have to be a resident in the United States for at least 14 years. And they point out that the Supreme Court in several cases and rulings have found that it is extra-constitutional, or it's unconstitutional, I should say, to add additional provisions. And so in that regard, this other provision saying, if you mishandled documents, you're now disqualified from being president, would never stand in terms of a Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that analysis. As if Donald Trump didn't have enough legal problems to deal with, this week he was deposed by the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, who, before she was even elected, said she was going to pursue Donald Trump to the ends of the earth. She has finally got him into a deposition room where her people interviewed him for 4 hours, and the president announced that he took the Fifth Amendment, that he reserved his right not to incriminate himself. Apparently did that hundreds of times in questions over 4 hours. 2 points about that. One, that a deposition, what he says in a civil case, can be used as evidence in other criminal cases. So the Manhattan DA has an open investigation into Donald Trump on taxes, for example. So Donald Trump, anything he said in that deposition, they could pull out. So that's one incentive, perhaps, for him not to testify. But there's some risk, too, to answering questions in a civil case, because unlike in a criminal case, if you do take the Fifth Amendment, it cannot be allowed to impeach your credibility, but can be used in a civil case to raise questions about your credibility. Kyle, what do you make of the president's decision there?
Well, I think it's a weighing of costs and benefits. As you say, it can be used as an inference against you in a civil case if you take the Fifth Amendment. On the other hand, he knows he's across the table from a Democratic politician who is very interested in finding something on him. And he knows that there are these other criminal cases, or criminal investigations at least, that are pending. And so maybe even if he were interested in speaking out and answering what the questions were, the inquiries that the Attorney General of New York is making there, he decided that the better part of valor was discretion. The other thing that I would add just on this point is it's a similar question of proportionality and whether this is equal justice here. I mean, I find it personally possible to believe that Trump overstated his assets over the years and so forth, just knowing the public statements that he has made about his net worth. Did he do so more than the average real estate mogul? I don't know. That's a question for investigators, but it certainly raises concerns when you have these statements by a politician running for office saying that they are going to, pledging as a campaign promise, that they're going to investigate somebody like a former president of the United States. And Trump put out a statement on this, citing some of these lines from Letitia James. He's going to know my name personally. What is fueling my soul right now is Trump. And then apparently on election night, she pledged to shine a bright light into every dark corner of Trump's real estate holdings. Again, it gets to the question of equal justice and proportionality. Nobody's above the law on one hand. On the other hand, nobody deserves to have politicians running for office promising that their job number one is going to be investigate you.
It's outrageous. I mean, it is just outrageous. I know they hate Trump, but come on. You can't say that I'm running for office in order to deploy the full resources of my office to be able to prosecute one man. I mean, come on. We will look and we will find something to prosecute him with. That's the implication of that. That is just not the way things are supposed to go.
Well, can I just point out, by the way, she actually did say, we're going to definitely sue him. This was before anyone had investigated anything. I mean, that is just, to your point about it being outrageous, Paul, she promised a lawsuit before they'd even turned over a paper.
Talk about politicizing justice. I mean, it is outrageous. And all this gets into the question of political motivation here. I mean, some Democrats say they want to disqualify Trump for office, but do they really? I mean, there's an argument that what they really do is they want to keep him in the center of attention, in the center of the political debate and the campaign of 2022, because they want to run against Donald Trump. Certainly beats running on inflation. And, they know he's polarizing. They know he divides the Republican Party. I know President Biden this year was asked about that. He said, well, I'd be very fortunate if I could run against Donald Trump again in 2024. I don't think he mentioned Trump's name. He said that person or that guy again in 2024. There's an argument that what this is all about is keeping Trump front and center in 2022.
I actually think that is what is going on, because go back again to 18 months ago, January 6th, in the immediate aftermath, people were all describing it as a riot. It didn't take very long, in fact, just a few days before Democrats had all latched on to the same scene, that in fact it was an insurrection. It was emblematic of a Republican Party that is violent and lawless, and at its head is Donald Trump. And, you already see a repeat of that exact same theme. You were talking about the Democratic media complex alongside all of these points that they're making at the moment, that this is obviously just holding people accountable to the law. No one is above the law. We're seeing all these similar headlines saying, this is obviously just a run-of-the-mill investigation and it had to happen because Donald Trump is lawless. And by the way, if you're any Republican who is even questioning this action, it just goes to show that you have disdain for rule of law. You are attempting to foment anger among your people, and there's going to be violence, and it's all because you guys don't respect the Department of Justice and the rule of law. And it carries into that theme. So I agree with you, Paul. I think this is about keeping Donald Trump out there and then tarring the entire Republican Party with an image that Democrats have sought to wrap around him.
Of course, the argument, Kyle, was also in reply that, well, they thought they could win against Trump. He'd be an easy mark in 2016. Didn't work out so well. That was a close run thing. But it did work in 2018, making Trump the center of their campaign for the House and the Senate. 2020, it worked for them. They won the presidency with Joe Biden as the anti-Trump. Worked in Georgia in 2021 in January to win those 2 Senate seats, as Trump complicated matters by making the centerpiece of that campaign his gripes about the presidential run. And I think there's more than a few Democrats who want to run against him in 2022 and would love to see him be the Republican nominee in 2024, not least because if he is, I think they figure that Liz Cheney or somebody else is going to run as a third-party candidate, and that's going to divide the Republican coalition. Kyle, you get the last word.
Yeah, well, be careful what you wish for is the famous line. Honestly, I think it probably depends on the Democrat, and I think it probably depends on the day that you ask them. Right after the Capitol riot, I think Congress was a little shaken, and if they'd had the votes to disqualify him for office after the impeachment, they would have done so. And so I think there's some of that sentiment certainly in the Democratic Party. On the other hand, they're really undermining their case by backing, fringe candidates in Republican primaries, spending $500,000 sometimes to back a guy who says the 2020 election was rigged and we need a forensic audit of it. People who may be in a position like the governor of Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, the Republican candidate there, who may be in a position to appoint a Secretary of State whose job is to certify the election results. And so the interventions that they've made in these Republican primaries, I think, has raised a lot of cynicism about what their real motivation is.
Well, I think that they are playing with fire, going down the path of prosecuting a former president, unless there is overwhelmingly compelling evidence of guilt, is taking the country on a very dangerous path with political implications that nobody now, certainly not Merrick Garland, can begin to know and much less control. And I think it's a very dangerous moment for the United States. All right, that's it for today's edition of Potomac Watch. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to Kim and Kyle. We will be back tomorrow, as usual, with another edition. And please send any comments, questions to us at pwpodcast@wsj.com.